you'd spoken to your therapist and they'd said, imagine what your life could be like in a year. So when people have written, in your comments and asked questions, you didn't just wake up one day and be right, I'm going to pack my suitcase. I think what comes with doing something that you have done, which is essentially leave your life, and you have traveled across the world and you are now living pretty much month by month in a different place. How did it happen? Like, so many people have always said, I've said it. I have had conversations this week who have said, I've talked about your story, and people said, but how does she do it? Like, you can't just do that. You can't just up and root your life. Like, I wish I could do that. So many people say, I wish I could do that. And I simply said, it's a choice. There are obviously things that happen, and financial barriers and monetary barriers and things. So I'm not being oblivious to that. And I know different people's situations are very different. But for you, let's just talk about you. You made that possible because you felt you had no other choice not to.
Yes. So, it doesn't happen overnight. I mean, I'm trying to kind of paint a picture here of years of yearning for something different, but not knowing what it is. But, I was attracted to Europe. I was attracted to living a more creative life. That was all I knew. That really was it. I mean, I also, I also wanted to experience a deep love in my life, romantic love, which I hadn't experienced. I hadn't had sex in a million years. So I wanted to, so there were so many things that I wanted. I wanted to feel alive. That was the basic thing, because I felt like I was dying in my life. And when my brother literally died.
No wonder Elizabeth Gilbert shared, like, it's like an eat, pray, love kind of. It is a total eat, pray, love. And
well, it's so interesting because, she wrote that book almost 20 years ago, or it was published, 18 years ago. My daughter is 20. She was 2 years old when that book came out. When I read that book, it was already too late for me. I couldn't have my eat, pray, love. I couldn't. She made a choice. I mean, what people often forget is at the beginning of that book, she was on the bathroom floor, absolutely in despair, because she couldn't bring herself to live the default life. She couldn't bring herself. She was married and she had a house in the suburbs. They filled it full of stuff, and she was getting ready to have a kid. And she just, every fiber in her body said, no, this is not you. You can't do this. And it was devastating. And so that's the beginning, is she chose not to live that default life. Most of us who, made that book such a sensation had already chosen the default life. We were already in the path. Once you have a kid, that's it. You're on it. You can't, it's really hard to disrupt it. And I really felt that I had a commitment to my child. And so her life, there were so many sacrifices made along the way. I mean, I could have changed careers much earlier, perhaps.
It made me think when people say, oh, do you not want children, Laura? And there's a part of me that I love children, but it just hasn't happened in my life for multiple reasons, which I've talked about before. But there is also that part of me that whenever I hear people talk about their children, there's either one or the other. Like, they're absolutely doting. They can't be without them. They say that they are the biggest gift, etc. And then there's other people who say, who I've talked to recently, of women of my age who have said, your life is never your own again. Don't underestimate that that is your life for a while. And so part of me is just like, oh, I don't know, maybe, and you can't just up and leave, can you?
No. I didn't feel that I could, right? There's such, I would never judge someone else's choices, because I don't know their stories, right? But I know that for me, having a child was a lifelong commitment to her, and I needed to know that she was okay, and that I was giving her the best life that I could. And I probably stayed in my marriage longer than I should have, because I was terrified of her being a child of divorce as I was. But it was important to me. At some point, I realized I wasn't doing her any favors because the marriage that she saw her parents having wasn't what it should have been. It wasn't, for many reasons. And I wanted to say that I think living a default life, it often involves children. It doesn't have to involve children. But I think the problem is that we're doing things that we think we should be doing, that we have to do, that people are telling us, oh, this is what it means to have a life. You're not living if you're not doing such and such, or you're not being an adult, right? If you're not doing such and such. I mean, there are plenty of women and people who do it in their 20s and 30s who say, screw that. That's not for me. And look at how hard it was for Elizabeth Gilbert. I mean, she was practically suicidal. I think she talks about that. And, that she couldn't do it because, she loved her husband and she wanted to have that life. But then this part of her said, no, you can't. It's not you. You're giving up too much. You're giving up traveling and writing and all the things that you want, that make you.
Gosh.
Yeah. Yeah. And so
it is exactly the conversation I've had this week with someone who sat and had a cup of coffee with and is sitting there in tears because they have this beautiful house, 2 children. They've been in a marriage for decades, absolutely unhappy. Other women have said the same, even in your comments. How do I change this, or can I, or should I? Because that word should, we continue to live lives that we should. We read about, we talk about, you should.
The people I know who've done it, when I talk to them, and I don't know very many people, but I have met some women while I've been traveling, and who have also, ditched a life that wasn't serving them anymore. And it was difficult. And in so many cases, it's not a choice. It doesn't feel like, okay, I'm making a pro-con list, or I'm trying to decide, what to do with the next part of my life. Oh, I think I'll quit my job and give up, the financial security and the home and the, stability and everything in the marriage, just on a whim. I mean, you don't do that on a whim. I did it to survive. I really did feel like I would die if I stayed. And I would die spiritually for sure. I was dying spiritually, absolutely. And then I started to feel that physically my life was not going to be very long. I could feel that in my body. And I could feel that my body was screaming at me, telling me, leave, escape, save yourself. Because I couldn't physically continue to live that life. And it has to, I don't know if it has to be that dramatic. For me, it did, because I had so many fears about hurting my daughter. But she's great. She's amazing. And she's
How
really
did she react? How did your daughter and your friends, your people around you?
Most of the people around me were like, wow, okay, wow, go girl, that's incredible. I did have one friend ask me, well, how does your daughter feel about this? Which is a kind of way of saying, how could you leave your daughter? And I couldn't have left her. She was going off to college, right? So I left when she left, and she was starting her life over and I was starting my life over. And I have to say, there were many times when I felt awful that I was breaking up her family home. And I just asked her about it recently again, actually. And she says, it's okay, because, she has a home now with her father who still lives in New Orleans. And while I was traveling, my daughter wrote me a card that one of the few things that I carry with me still everywhere is this card that she sent me. And she says in the card that I've inspired her, basically, that she's proud of me and she wants to live as fully in her life as she sees me doing in my life. And that was, I'm going to get teary actually just thinking about it, but that was the ultimate to me, was that she would see me living a full life. Because I tell you, to see our parents, to see a parent not living fully, making their lives small, not doing the things that are really important to them, right? I mean, that's soul killing for a child too. And they see that, and I really do think, that it was that internal, the internal need and motivation for me, but it was also, boy, a stark realization sitting next to my brother as he took his very last breath, that will be all of us one day. We will all be there taking our last breath. And when that time comes for me, I don't want to be full of regrets for not having fully lived. And that was it. That was it for me.
I hope you enjoyed this video, and you can listen to the full episode of Flip It wherever you get your podcasts. Please do make sure you're following us on social media for all the latest updates. And I'd be hugely grateful if you could rate, review, and subscribe, because together we can share more stories and voices that deserve to be heard.